I'm Megan Rosenthal.
And I'm Alexis Lee, and this is the Mayo Lab podcast. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mayo Lab podcast, final episode of the fall, of regular programming at least for the fall. And we're just so excited to be back and talk about the season so far. And for those of you that don't know and aren't in Mississippi, the day we record this is like day 2 of kind of winter. We got an early winter. Yes. So we're going to have like a little fireside chat.
There we go. I love it.
So this is going to be just kind of overviewing the season, kind of recapping things. And I think Megan and I have pulled out we have noticed some very consistent and common themes throughout the season, throughout all 11 episodes. And so we're just going to talk about them and kind of bring things up maybe more, talk about things we've learned or what we're implementing maybe. So we're really excited. So Megan, where would you like to start?
Well, so I can't believe we actually did 11 episodes this season so far. That's really exciting because I have kind of lost track and they've all blurred together like in the best possible way.
Yeah.
But in anticipation of this chat today, I started thinking about, I think, at least anyway, we gave some really good information. We spoke to some really amazing experts in their spaces who provided a lot of really tangible things that we could be doing. And admittedly, some of them I have started doing, right? And like thinking about this in a different kind of way. But then I got to thinking about the magnitude of the stuff we covered over 11 episodes. And it's so much. There's so much really good stuff. But I also started thinking, gosh, that's like really overwhelming. Like there's just a lot of stuff that we need to be thinking about and doing. And this is in addition to, raising our kids to be decent human beings and drinking enough water, but not too much water, and eating our vegetables and exercising and doing all of those things that we know are good for us, but not necessarily straightforward to implement into our day-to-day lives. And it struck me that oftentimes, at least for myself, when I get this, like, okay, all this really great stuff, yes, I should do it. The first reaction is, why am I not doing it already? Yeah. Ooh, is that because I'm not a good person? Maybe I should be doing things better or harder. And then you get that shame and that guilt for not being above and beyond in all of these different spaces. And so I thought maybe we could start today by thinking, working through for you and I, how we break down doing these kinds of things in our day-to-day life, and maybe tell a few stories about how we've started implementing practices, whether they are related to what we did in the podcast or other pieces, just to provide folks with some context and some larger understanding about like we're not all perfect. No. We're not going to win every day. We're not going to get it right every day, but how do we start making those incremental, like this YouTube channel that I follow for like workouts, like 1% better every day. How do we start doing that? Yeah. And I'd be curious to know from you, Alexis, like how do you start thinking about these things? Yeah. And I know you have a longer trajectory than many of us as it relates to like health and wellness and things like that. But like working in this space, how do you do that? How do you get 1% better every day? Yeah. Or maybe 0.5% better?
0.5% better, just a little bit better every day. And I think it comes down to really taking inventory. And we talked about this a little bit in the most recent episode with Dr. Bradshaw and Dr. Smith of like, what are your values? Like, what do I value? And I've had a lot of good conversations actually just very recently with friends, family, people I'm very close to about values and breaking down values. I think we get that lost a lot. We forget, at the core of us, we have these values, these things we want to embody or things we're striving towards. And so when you know those and you're really familiar with those and how those interact with your life, I think it makes it much easier when you hold other things up and say, well, should I do this in a way? Or does this align with where I want to be or where I want to go? And so, being in this space and kind of doing this work, I've gotten really passionate about, educating myself and others. And so I think one of the best examples most recent that has kind of been implemented in my life and my friends and family life is the, talking and correcting people on the spot for different verbiages or incorrect verbiages, or educating them in a way that's helpful or maybe funny. My parents now all joke before they speak. They'll say, well, Alexis is probably going to correct me. But, they've all stared thinking about it, and at least it starts spinning in their head. And then they haven't even really used maybe incorrect language or, offensive language. We've all started using person-first language in our house, which I think is really cool. And it started kind of as a joke, and now it's just become something that for them then they've realized like, wow, this is important and it matters. And so that to me is part of my value. But another thing like Cal brought up in the first episode, we're in an election year in Mississippi. I never thought about that at all to talk to or learn about the people that are running, that maybe mental health and well-being and addiction or recovery is very important to them. And so that was something that for me, I reflected and was like, wow, like I'm a voting member, I get to do this. So like I want to make it count. And I know that I didn't really think I had a voice. And I mean, maybe I don't. That's a whole other podcast. But like at least I can feel good when I go and say, wow, I really believe in this person.
Right.
And so that's been really interesting. And then just taking, nuggets of, Dr. McAfee said, 3 good things every day, which I kind of did. And so I just refined it a little bit. And so it's also reminding myself of like the small successes that I'm already doing.
Right.
And maybe you're kind of already doing something someone mentioned and you just want to tweak it a little bit.
Right.
Or maybe what they said doesn't work for you and you want to keep your way. But, we're all doing the best we can, like you said. And it's hard to do everything all day, every day.
Right.
1% better, 1% forward, or what's relevant in the season of life you're in. We talked a little bit about that yesterday.
Yeah, you just covered like a whole football field of stuff, right? But I think there's a couple of things that I want to come back to that you talked about in particular. And the first is like getting into understanding what your values are and digging into that. So talk to me, like how did you get into that process for yourself, right? Like how do you identify what is important to you or not important to you? Because I think we often throw this idea around like, oh, get in touch with your values or understand your values. But do we know what that means, right? And do we, and are what I'm saying my values are actually aligned with my real values, like the stuff that's in the center of your heart, in the middle of your body. You know what I mean?
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how you did that.
So I, obviously we've talked about this, I'm in recovery, I work a program. So part of that has been learning a lot about myself and what I value and what I love and what's at the core of me, like you said. But one of the books I read actually last winter break was Think Like a Monk by Shetty. And there's a portion in it that talks about like your higher values and your lower values. And so that really started me thinking, probably like that really sparked a lot of, I had a spark, but maybe that like really the fire kind of really caught at that. And so I really dug into, he gave a list of values and they were values that I'd never, really heard of, or they were worded differently. And so, with a very, much of a lens on myself, I went to Google and I got very careful though, but like pulled up what are different values or how, other things as like a brainstorming exercise and kind of slowly, had a whole schwack of words and then slowly kind of narrowed down to, and I think Dr. Haynes talked a little bit about this of like, okay, you slowly work your way down to kind of what matters. And so, had 5 or 6 and then shared it with people really close to me. And I still haven't really shared it outside that group. And so it's kind of been like a refining year, I guess, if I'd say, of, having people hold me accountable to that, people I trust, whether that be, I have, a friend, a family member, or someone that's kind of a third party, a sponsor, other people that see me in different spaces. And so they can kind of hold me accountable because I think also in values, I can speak to when I was in college, I kind of felt like I was 2 different people. And we've had some people talk a little bit about, I was someone in the classroom, but I was someone then on the weekends.
Right.
And so I think I've gotten to the point in my life, and it's taken a long time to say I can be the same person in all the rooms I'm in.
Right.
But it's having all those people in the different rooms I'm in hold me to that. And, if someone who knows me in church, do they say the same thing? Like, would you say the same thing about me, Megan, in work? Would my mom say the same thing about me at home? Kind of really trying to drill down to that. And honestly, the more I've gotten drilled down into my values, the more everything else kind of seems to just fall into place. And I know that sounds really simple and like, whoa, okay, Alexis, but it really makes it a lot easier for me to say, if this is what I value, it's really black or white, then the actions I take and the things I do day to day. Because I want those to mirror, like you said, what's inside and what reflects. I think back to the, if you plant a seed, what fruit are you going to get?
Right.
I mean, and that just, that takes a long time. And I don't think we can all say, if I change my value to service today, tomorrow, I'm going to be a servant-hearted person.
Right.
It doesn't take overnight. It might take years, months. I mean, maybe weeks. Depends on how close you already are to it. So that's been kind of how I started the value journey. So yeah, I would, if you haven't, just Think Like a Monk by Shetty's a great book. And I love it. And, but there's a lot of different resources and I'm sure we can find some and we'll link those in the show notes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that somebody was talking about values, and I can't remember which it was. So we will have to go back and look at our notes from before about doing a measure related to that. But one of the things I like about what you just said around values is that you've refined those over time, right? That this wasn't something that you woke up and you're like, okay, my values are good.
Yeah.
And then you've been thinking about them, and that you've had this evolution of you as a person going from feeling like two separate people, what you do in class, what you do on the weekends, to kind of those two people meeting and becoming one. And I think it's important, especially at this time of year, talking to our student listeners, like that's normal.
Yeah.
That's normal. It's normal to feel chaotic and spastic and stressed and all of those different things. That's totally normal for somebody who's in your position at your moment in time, right? And to be thinking through how do we make one step in that direction to getting those two people united into somebody that you can feel proud of, and that is reflected in that space. And this is a normal part of that process. And I think I had a similar kind of journey thinking through my latest iteration of values, because I think that values can also change somewhat depending on the season of life that you're in.
Should. Yeah.
I think they should too, right? Like if you are in school and doing, all of the things that are related to school, like, maybe you have to sacrifice time with your family on the weekends. Yeah. Maybe you have to sacrifice going home on a regular basis, because right now school's got to be that priority. It's not forever, but it's a moment in time that those things have to shift somewhat. And I did that reshifting again a few years ago, and this is related to work things, right? Because, one of the benefits of maybe being good at your job is that you get more work, right? And so people recognize your value and your contributions, and then they're like, okay, you can do this, and this is a really cruel thing, and here's this other opportunity, and then suddenly your nose is just like peeking out above the water. And so I sat down and I really recalibrated that for myself to think, okay, my family's really important. Having time with them to like unwind and do that, that's a really key important value for me. When and if my students need something from me, okay, that's a really important thing to be responsive to their needs, right? And so I went down this list, and it was like Dr. Haynes had said, it was like ended up being like 4 or 5 things that were like just the top priority. And what I ended up doing at one point is like writing them on a sticky note, because I love sticky notes. Anybody who knows me knows I love sticky notes. And I put it on my computer. And so as the email requests were coming in or text messages were coming in, I could refer to that and say, okay, is this in my top list of priorities? No? Okay, well, that can wait until tomorrow, because I have these other things that are more important today. And it is, like you said, for me, it became so much easier to make those decisions about how I was going to engage in that moment in time. And it really did help kind of solidify and get me through a really stressful time and place at that, in that season of my life. And now that I say that out loud, I really need to do it again, because, life is life and it's crazy. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about too, and I totally lost my train of thought, but we were talking through kind of like, how do you implement those changes, and how do you, actualize or embody or what have you, your values. And so talk me through like habit formation for you. Like, how do you do that? So you talked about your 3 good things. How did you start that process and kind of refine it after what Dr. McAfee said about in our previous episode around that, the value of those?
Yeah. And so I used to as in I like until like a month ago.
Yeah.
I have a morning journal practice and an evening journal practice. And so I used to do gratitude and both. And gratitude I would do something simple like nature or fresh air, something very not targeted specifically. It was kind of just a general of what am I thankful for today? Maybe like the sunrise, or maybe I saw a friend. And so reshifting that practice to the 3 good things of what happened today that was good, and then why did that happen? Like he said, being able to say, okay, well, why? And so I'm trying to think of like a good recent example that I wrote down. So my mom is currently over here when we're recording this, and so she decided to come over to spend time here. And so I got really intentional time, and I've had really intentional quality time with my mom. And so it's like, why did that happen? Well, that happened because I was very open and honest with my mom the weeks before that about, some time and space. We had a family emergency, and now we're kind of all stepped away from that a little bit and getting a break. Being open with honest with her about how hard that was for me, but also how good it's been for me to be back in a routine here, around my people. And she was kind of like, well, I really need that too. And so having her feel like she can come over and have that time and space because I was vulnerable and honest, like open that door up in a way. And so even just like reflecting that made it so much more sweet just to say, wow, I have my time with my mom, but also, wow, I have a relationship with my mom that is that honest and open. And we've built that, it wasn't like that in college. And so being an adult, I'm her adult child now, it's like our relationship's grown so much, but it's not grown overnight.
Right.
So being able to backtrack and say, okay, how did that happen? And then I started reflecting more, and I have it in a journal. So my good point ends up being like, a whole page long because I've journaled about it, which is sweet and reminds me just like to continue to do the work. But other practices of putting into place, I think, is just taking time, as every good habit does. And it doesn't always stick. And so I try to, like, every month or every other month, just, my morning and evening routine are really sacred to me. And we've talked about this in the office, how much those are important to both of us. And so what month to month, what's working, maybe now that it's darker out and, colder out, darker earlier and than evening, like there's different things that I need or I want in my evening routine versus maybe my summer one.
Right.
And so just shifting and ebbing and flowing and kind of what we were talking about with Dr. Smith and Dr. Bradshaw, of like one size doesn't fit all, and nor does one size fit all for even the year you're in.
Yeah.
And reminding that. And so I think people get stuck on, if I want to have it, I should have it right away.
Right.
Instead of knowing it takes time and, however many amount of days it takes for a habit to catch on.
Right.
There's science behind it. But it doesn't happen overnight. And I think we're in a society very much, and we've talked about it a little bit throughout, I think, the whole season of like a quick fix. Something that happens right away.
Sure.
We have instant gratification, online shopping, social media, all the things. We want things right away. And so not forgetting the work you have to put in and build. But I think if you know why you're building a habit, why you're doing something, kind of back to your value or why it's important to you, it makes it much easier.
Absolutely.
And it's made it easier for me to let go of habits maybe because they just aren't sticking, and it's because I really don't care. Or it was something like cliche, or I saw on social media, and maybe that was and it wasn't working for me.
I love that recognition too, right? Because if it isn't aligned, then like, why are we wasting time doing it? Like another cliche, the day is the day, right? We have that amount of time. It's 24 hours, whatever. So why would you waste your time doing something and engaging in something that's not of value to you? If it's like, you get influenced by something on social media, like you should whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, but I don't actually care about that. And that's not important to me. If it's not important to you, good. Yeah. Like you've made a decision, right? You've made a recognition, and then you can refocus that attention on a thing that is really and truly important to you. And what's important to me and what's important to you shouldn't and don't have to be the same, right? And that's a totally, again, normal thing. And that we need to, I think we embrace that idea, like in our off public lives, right? Like we all know these things to be true, but we just don't necessarily embody them in what we perceive or what we put on social or what have you. But I think, again, we all know these things are real.
And that's what I do love about social media, in the, is that there is so many people out there that are sharing what they do. And so there is so many places where you can go to be inspired or find ideas, but no, you don't have to do it all. Like even those girls, I'll just use the example of that girl routines. Like, let's be honest, they're not doing it every day.
No,
they're not. And so it's taking that lens on, like we talked about too, of, that's their highlight reel. Right. Or maybe that's what they do one day out of the week.
Right.
It's not day to day.
Right. No, I love that. I think that's a really cool kind of comment. And the other thing, I want to come back to your mom and the conversation that you have been, joyfully having with them around use of language and person first language. And what I want to commend you on is doing that from a place of grace and compassion, right? Because I think it gets, as we start to learn more good stuff, whatever the good stuff is in, like how to be healthier, how to be more compassionate to our fellow man, how to understand the impact and the consequences of substance use disorder in that community. And you can insert whatever thing you want to learn in this space here, right? But that, if we're really looking to spread that, which is a major theme of what we talked about in this season, right, is spreading it, starting with ourselves, spreading it to our families, and then out to our communities. Doing that with grace, love, and compassion is such an important thing to consider. Because if you look at the data and the literature that's around, changing hearts and minds, I can promise you beyond a shadow of a doubt, no one ever changed their mind after you called them stupid to their face, right? Like that has never been a thing that has taken place, right? If you come down on somebody and say, how dare you use blah, 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 right? Or how dare you say this? Or don't you know, idiot person? What happens if somebody talks like that to you, right? You shut down, you don't listen anymore, you become defensive, and then all of the good information is lost. And I think that how you started that in a kind of teasing way and from a place of love and compassion to your parents, knowing that, you know, you're wanting to move them in a slightly different way than they may have been used to talking before, and that they can joke back with you and be like, well, I might be doing this wrong, but they feel safe to be wrong in front of you and know from, you know, within themselves that they're also going to get the good information and they'll try again next time. And I think that's a really important thing for us to be thinking about around these topics for ourselves and for our families. You can always try again tomorrow.
Yes.
You can always start this over, right? I think about this as it relates to like diet and exercise. Not diet as in like the kind of the not great diet of like you should be losing weight or what have you, though I've done that too. But this idea of like eating healthier or finding, you know, eating green things more often than you than you maybe had been. Is it, okay, so I have a bad day.
Right.
I can start tomorrow. I can start next week. I can be in a season where things are crazy and hectic and not going my way, and then it slows down some, and I can start it again, and that's totally fine. And I think that you know we need to be thinking about how to extend that grace to ourselves and to everyone. You can know better, do better. Yeah, try again. It'll be okay.
It's our new saying in the office, know better, do better.
Right. We totally stole that from Maya Angelou just for clarity's sake. But yes, right?
You are listening to the Mayo Lab podcast. For more information and resources, visit themayolab.com. Now, back to the episode.
And I think it's too important, like you said, you can always start again. And like even in the day, if you catch yourself in the midday, it's that. And I think too, like, yes, I've recently too, I've been like, if I just get to November, and it's October 31st when we're recording. It's like so close. I'm like, if I just get to November,
yes.
And so I've been there, but I've also been like, okay, today's not going well. I can start again this afternoon.
Right.
I can pick up, or like I've been on social media all morning, so I can stop right now. Like I don't have to say, well, my limit's already done for the day. I might as well just keep going. Like I can say, okay, no. Now I'm done. Or, well, I've already eaten the 3 sweets, so I might as well keep going. Or it's like, no, I can stop now too.
Right.
But there is that season, like you said, it depends on where you're at. Like maybe you do just need to get to the end of the week or the end of the season or the end of the month. We've all been there.
Absolutely, yes. And for those of you who are listening who are coming to the events next week, this is what we're talking about, right? So we're October 31st. We have a big event on Monday next week, and then on Wednesday too. We have some other things going on. So you will know where our headspace is when you listen to this episode when we see you next week. And I'm exactly in the same spot too, right? Where like I just got to get to, I have a big grant that's due tomorrow, and it's been the biggest grant that I've ever worked on. And this is for those of you who don't know, people who work at universities, faculty and professors often have to submit applications to get funding to do our research. And so this one is going to the National Institutes of Health, hopefully, fingers crossed. But it's like this huge undertaking. Our application is 150 pages long. I think I looked at it this morning. And so getting all of that together, herding all the cats in a good direction, like that's just a lot. And so I've not worked out as much as I would normally or would like to. I've, worked on the weekends. I can't work in the evenings because my brain is mush, which I tend not to do. And so as we've got that application put into today or tomorrow, hopefully, that'll recalibrate this weekend. So not checking email, not looking at things, and it's going to take a minute for me to get used to not doing that again, because you just get in the habit of doing it. But I also know that for myself, I need to have that break to be good at my job during the week.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can't be on 24/7, even though that is part of our hustle culture, right? And if you're not on, you're not being productive. I know for me, if to be good at that and to be able to be engaging with people during the week and be my best version of myself, I can't do that on the weekends. I need to like be away and not have to talk to people and not have to do that kind of stuff. Even though I love talking to people, just know that too. But I do need that. And so it's going to take me a few weekends to get back into that, reestablish that good habit that I had before. And that's normal and okay. And I'll get back there again and then I'll mess it up again too. And that's part of, being a human being, right? Is we're never going to get it right. There's I think that's the other thing I was thinking about in anticipation of this discussion is that we talk about wellness as if it's a destination, right? Yeah. Like it's a place you will get to and then it will be nirvana, roses and sunshine. And that's totally not accurate, realistic. No. And it really does actually, if you look at the literature on this, sets us up for failure because there's always a sense of like moving the goalpost, right? Like you just can't, you just didn't you won that one, but you have this other thing now, and you want this other thing now. And that's just not a really effective way to think about the world, right? In terms of like our wellness and our family's wellness and our community's wellness. Yeah. Like there's not a place where you're going to get to go like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right?
Not that easy, no.
No.
And one of the things you've brought up when you were speaking is, and I think we've heard about it throughout the season, is like the essence of two things of honesty, like honest communication and like honest what you're going through. And so I know, like we've talked in the office, I know Megan's been going through this grant. I know she's been working on weekends because of this. So it's like it's able for me to be able, and then go into community. So I'll start with there, like you have to be honest and then have community around you. So now it's like I can be of help to Megan in a way, or like I know Megan's now almost done, and so she should be working on the weekends because I know your values and that. And it's like I can be a person, and I know you've spoken probably to others who are close to you who know it's like we have community around you in a way so that they can also help you and be accountable for you and also just uplift you in the way of like we all know community and people are so important for things other than accountability, but just it's so important. And so what new things have you learned about community in this season and like hearing everyone talk about it?
I think the thing, and you just kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Because I'm totally one of those people, and this is like definitely to my detriment. I'm not good at asking for help, right? I'm not good. It's not a natural reaction for me, a natural inclination for me to be like, I'm really struggling right now, and I need somebody to like do this thing for me because I just can't. I'm always, of the opinion if you said yes to it, then you should do it, and because I'm a people pleaser too, it's like the worst combination. So you say yes to everything and then you're underwater. Yeah. And then you're not in alignment with what you want your values to be, how you want to exist and show up in the world. And so that is one of the things I've been working on is saying, letting things go and being like, you know what? I need somebody else to take this on. And that has been I love all of the parts of getting to work with you, but that has been one of the things I've taken from you, Alexis, is this partnership in this process, right? And knowing that you want to help me and the Institute be successful and that you're here as a partner in that process has made it safer for me to ask for help in other spaces. And so I think that's one of the things that I will continue to work on and to build out that community and to know too, like whether I recognize it before, I had community. I've always had community. Yeah, we all have community. Yes. But you often get stuck in this idea of like, oh, it's only, I have to do it because I said I would do it because that is, whatever. And this idea is like all just about me in this case. And that's totally not true. And that you're actually, and I heard this a couple of weeks ago and it really struck me that when you're not asking for help when you need it, you're actually depriving your community of an opportunity to feel really great for helping you.
I love that.
And for somebody who struggles asking for help, but is a helper, realizing that, you're like, crap, I've been actually not a good friend, and I've been depriving them of an opportunity, not in a selfish way, but like of them getting warm fuzzies or feeling good or feeling helpful because I didn't ask for that. And that's really helped me be thinking about it in a different way because it's just not, like I said, it's not natural for me.
Yeah, and it's because it's like you don't want to burden them.
That's right.
That's how I've thought about in the past. Like, I don't want to burden my friends with that. When I have some friends that are very, when I was gone for 2 weeks when I had a friend who checked on my house, who did all these things. She put dinner in my fridge the day I got back. Aww. Like things like that is what she lives for. But she would have done it, but I asked her for help on the front end. And like, I kept saying, thank you, I owe you, thank you so much. She's like, no, this is literally what friends, like this is what we're here for.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. I've missed that so much in my life, like you're saying, because I thought I was going to burden people by bringing them into my life or bringing them close to me or like asking for help.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not, and I think we have to get over this idea that like, that it is a burden, right? Because it's not a burden. And if you're the kind of person like Alexis and I are to be helpers, do you feel burdened when somebody asks you for help?
Yeah.
No, you just do it because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And so for those of us who are on the other side of that aren't good at asking, we have to like get out of our own way in that regard because we miss out on so much when we don't become a little vulnerable in that space. And I think that's really where it comes down to is like how I worry that other people would see me not being good enough because I had to ask for help.
Right.
And that's messed up. If you say it like that, it's not right.
Yeah. Once you actually reframe things a little bit, sometimes you're like, wait, no, that actually makes no sense.
Right.
Okay, back up. Like, just like you talk yourself off a cliff, but then it's like you talk yourself back up. You're like, no, this actually makes sense. Like you're saying, like, I would to empower people and like, you know, they want to be of service. They want, like, why would I not? Why would I not?
Right. So that's what this season has taught me about community is that we all have them.
Yes.
And we just need to be better about mobilizing them and thinking about that and remembering that. And if we need to build a different community or add to our community, everyone's looking for that. And so you just have to start, be a little bit brave, get out there. And we talked about that, like how do you make friends and how do you meet new people and how do you have those conversations in earlier episodes. And so like if you've forgotten that or maybe missed that one, go back and take a listen to that and think about like what does that look like for you and how do you align your new community partners, members, whomever, with your values, right? With the things that are really important to you at this moment in time.
I think you said something really important of mobilizing your community and, you know, using them. And I think that for me is something I've begun to do, you know, in previous seasons. You realize then if there's people in your community that really aren't in line or aren't people that you want in your inner circle, or maybe they're on your acquaintance circle, you know, when you mobilize them, you're able to get a real sense of kind of, and this is going to sound not how I want it to sound, but you're able to realize like who you need and who you don't, you know? And so then but you don't know until you use your community and you utilize that. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm missing a piece of my community. I'm missing someone that can play a really important role in my life or I didn't think I wanted in my life. And no, actually their skills are really needed. I really need that person. And so, but you don't know until you use. So don't be afraid to use your community. And then I think too, it helps to spur conversation both ways, you know. Vulnerability breeds vulnerability. You know, Brené Brown always says that. And so it's like if me being more vulnerable has encouraged friends and community to be more vulnerable, they can mobilize their community. And so it's like everyone's mobilizing. And so it's cool then to see the energy kind of go and spread and you feel more empowered to go do other things outside of your comfort zone.
Right. And I love what you talked about too, is this idea that like once you do that mobilization, you realize that there are some people that maybe don't need to be in your inner circle. And I think oftentimes we think about that and we're like, oh my God, we're losing friends or I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings or, you know, whatever the case may be. And really, maybe you will. Maybe you will lose friends. Maybe you will hurt somebody's feelings because there's that lack of alignment happening. But thinking back to this idea of being brave and you know, taking good steps for you, what's worse? What's worse, having somebody in your circle who isn't feeding your kind of advancement and aligning with the values that you are interested in mobilizing or pursuing at that moment in time, or having somebody in your life who is, you know, who's been there for a really long time and that's just like momentum has carried you and continues to carry you forward. And I think that's a really, I mean, it's a hard lesson. It was a hard lesson for me to have to learn as I was coming through, you know, graduating high school and going to college, because I was in my graduating class of friends, one of like a handful of people that went to college. Like most of the people that I was friends with in school didn't end up going to college, or they went to different colleges in different spaces. And so like that losing of friends was really traumatic at that time, but also the best possible thing for me because I was able to make new friends and be in different spaces and be a different version of Megan than was in high school, right? I think lots of people that I went to high school with would look at me now and be like, wow, she's not the same person at all, right? And probably maybe like a saltier version of what I was in high school. But this is more in alignment. I feel more like me now than what you had talked about before, being those like two separate people. And it took those hard things. And again, that's normal. It's totally normal. Everyone does it. Like, we have this idea that, you know, as you get grown up, everything just kind of is regulated and nothing bad happens to you. And it's this idea of like you're getting to this penultimate moment where everything's just good and you don't have to try to do things anymore. And it's just, that's not true. There's always this evolution that's taking place as part of all aspects of life, right? We're always moving. You want to get like physics here, like everything's always moving, right? Like the universe is expanding, and it's true. It's true, but we get caught up in this idea that it has to be stagnant,
right? And two, I think in season of friendships and community, of you can have people not in your season now, you know, and but come back around. And I think this is something Dr. Bardwash talked about, of like, people are going to change. You know, when people go to recovery or to rehab, or they go to intensive treatment of some sort, maybe you need to let that person go for a while. And like, maybe they don't need to be in your circle. Like, let's probably be honest. Like, they need some space. And that's the hard, you know, you want to love them, but you also need to not enable them.
Right.
Like he was talking about. So, you know, maybe you need to let people go for a while. And maybe it's not something like rehab or an intensive. Maybe it's just they're in a different season of life, or you're growing more than they are. And they're not, you know, at the same, you know, running next to you, you know, running the same race. But maybe, you know, in a couple years, weeks, months, whatever, they come back around, and that's still okay. And like, you can have people enter in and enter out of your different seasons of life, and not just like ban them forever. It's not like you have to say, sorry, never again. We're not friends. This is it. We're done.
Absolutely.
It's just maybe a not right now. And, you know, I've had people that are like, you know, thank you so much for that hard love of like letting people go. Maybe helps them realize like there's things they need to look at or realize, or they feel the space then to grow. I've had a friend who's stepped away and been like, I didn't realize like how much I felt, you know, closed in. Like, I felt like I needed space to grow and be my own person. I could be someone else, you know, maybe not in the shadow of our group or whatever. And so it's like, that's good and okay. And then, you know, they come back around. And so it's not like end all be all when people leave your community. And maybe it is, but also I think the older I've gotten, the more I realize like it is still hard to make friends. It is. It really is.
It is.
But, and so A, it doesn't have to be like we've talked about, but B, those people you have in your life, they can stay there forever, but maybe not consistently forever. Maybe there's seasons of ebb and flow. And just reminding that, like we said, not everything has to be all the time 100%.
Right. Well, and I think about another example I think about around that is because like I'm amongst the only people in my friend group, the only person in my friend group who doesn't have kids, right? Don't have children. I have little dogs, but those don't count as kids, obviously, right? And so for some of the people that I have known for most of my life, like they've got families, like large families that have those, it's not, we're not friends anymore, but they have different priorities. They have to take their kids to like soccer and dance and hockey because many of them are Canadian. And so that doesn't mean they hate me. That doesn't mean they don't like me anymore. That doesn't mean that they don't value our friendship, but we have different priorities. Right. And I think about that as a student going to different professional programs or going into graduate school or going and moving in those different directions. Maybe your friends aren't doing that. Maybe your friends are done after 4 years and have gone off and gotten really amazing careers, but you really feel that pull to go do something else, whatever that ends up looking like. That's okay. That doesn't mean that they don't like you. That doesn't mean that you're not being true to them. That doesn't mean that, you know, any of those things are true. It's just that you're on a slightly different path and that's fine. And you have to find a way, if you're feeling that pull in your heart to do that next thing or be in a different space than the people around you, you've got to find a way to be okay with that. Because again, how awful would it be to get to the end of your life or the end of your, you know, what have you, and be like, oh, I really wish I had done blah, 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 blah. But I didn't because I was scared. And that would be really, that would make me really sad. The idea of that makes me really sad.
Right. Agree.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered so much.
We did. Again,
we always do.
We do. Yes.
And so hopefully you guys can take a little bit of nugget of something we said, or maybe feel encouraged or feel like you're not alone or have an idea, or maybe you're spurred to go back and listen to all the episodes. We hope you do that. So we are so excited for what's ahead for the Mayo Lab podcast, and we have some really good things coming ahead. And so we hope to see you next season. But in the meantime, listen to season 2, listen to season 1. You can find us on all the streaming platforms, YouTube. Reach out to us, and any feedback, thoughts, ideas.
Yes.
You want to hear something more from us, or maybe there's a topic we haven't covered yet that you really are like, come on, guys. Shoot us an email,
Yes.
shoot us a DM. All of our stuff will link in the show notes.
Yeah.
And so we're really thankful, though, for you guys listening and supporting, and it means so much to Megan and I, and the whole team behind it. That we have people that tune in every week to listen. So thank you guys, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mayo Lab Podcast. The Mayo Lab Podcast is produced by Dr. Natasha Jeter, Dr. Megan Rosenthal, Alexis Lee, Slade Lewis, and Hannah Finch. This podcast was recorded at Broadcast Studio in Oxford, Mississippi. The show was mixed and mastered by Clay Jones, and our original music was composed by Slade Lewis. The Mayo Lab Podcast is brought to you by the William Magee Institute for Student Wellbeing. For more information on the Mayo Lab Podcast, head over to themayolab.com and follow us on social media at the Mayo Lab. If you enjoyed listening to the Mayo Lab Podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Megan Rosenthal, Alexis Lee, and their guests on the show. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for the medical advice of a licensed counselor or physician. The listener should consult with their mental health professional in any matters relating to his or her health or the health of a child.